Part 2, Chapter 4, Montaigne, or the Skeptic, of Representative Men, by Ralph Waldo Emerson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 2, Chapter 4. The essays, therefore, are an entertaining soliloquy on every random topic that comes into his head, treating everything without ceremony, yet with masculine sense. There have been men with deeper insight, but, one would say, never a man with such abundance of thoughts. He is never dull, never insincere, and has the genius to make the reader care for all that he cares for. The sincerity and marrow of the man reaches to his sentences. I know not anywhere the book that seems less written. It is the language of conversation transferred to a book. Cut these words, and they would bleed. They are vascular and alive. One has the same pleasure in it that we have in listening to the necessary speech of men about their work, when any unusual circumstance give momentary importance to the dialogue. For blacksmiths and teamsters do not trip in their speech. It is a shower of bullets. It is Cambridge men who correct themselves, and begin again at every half sentence, and moreover will pun and refine too much, and swerve from the matter to the expression. Montaigne talks with shrewdness, knows the world, and books, and himself, and uses a positive degree, never shrieks, or protests, or praise. No weakness, no convulsion, no superlative. Does not wish to jump out of his skin, or play any antics, or annihilate space or time, but is stout and solid, tastes every moment of the day, likes pain because it makes him feel himself, and realize things, as we pinch ourselves to know that we are awake. He keeps the plane. He rarely mounts or sinks, likes to feel solid ground, and the stones underneath. His writing has no enthusiasms, no aspiration, contented, self-respecting, and keeping the middle of the road. There is but one exception, in his love for Socrates. In speaking of him, for once his cheek flushes, and his style rises to passion. Montaigne died of quinsy at the age of 60 in 1592. When he came to die, he caused the mass to be celebrated in his chamber. At the age of 33 he had been married, but, he says, "Might I have had my own will, I would not have married Wisdom herself, if she would have had me. But 'tis much purpose to evade it. The common custom and use of life will have it so. Most of my actions are guided by example, not choice." In the hour of death he gave the same weight to custom. Que sais-je? What do I know? This book of Montaigne the world has endorsed, by translating it into all tongues, and printing 75 editions of it in Europe, and that, too, a circulation somewhat chosen, namely, among courtiers, soldiers, princes, men of the world, and men of wit and generosity. Shall we say that Montaigne has spoken wisely, and given the right and permanent expression of the human mind on the conduct of life? We are natural believers. Truth, or the connection between cause and effect, alone interests us. We are persuaded that a thread runs through all things. All worlds are strung on it, as beads. And men and events and life come to us only because of that thread. They pass and repass, only that we may know the direction and continuity of that line. A book or statement which goes to show that there is no line, but random and chaos, a calamity out of nothing, a prosperity and no account of it, a hero born from a fool from a hero, dispirits us. Seen or unseen, we believe the tie exists. Talent makes counterfeit ties. Genius finds the real ones. We hearken to the man of science because we anticipate the sequence in natural phenomena which he uncovers. We love whatever affirms, connects, preserves, and dislike what scatters or pulls down. One man appears whose nature is to all men's eyes conserving and constructive. His presence supposes a well-ordered society, agriculture, trade, large institutions, and empire. If these did not exist, they would begin to exist through his endeavors. Therefore, he cheers and comforts men, who feel all this in him very readily. The nonconformist and the rebel say all manner of unanswerable things against the existing republic, but discover to our sense no plan of house or state of their own. Therefore, though the town and state and way of living, which our counsellor contemplated, might be a very modest or musty prosperity, yet men rightly go for him, and reject the reformer, so long as he comes only with axe and crowbar. But though we are natural conservers and causationists, and reject a sour, dumpish unbelief, the skeptical class, which Montaigne represents, have reason, and every man, at some time, belongs to it. Every superior mind will pass through this domain of equilibration. I should rather say, will know how to avail himself of the checks and balances in nature as a natural weapon against the exaggeration and formalism of bigots and blockheads. Skepticism is the attitude assumed by the student in relation to the particulars which society adores, but which he sees to be reverent only in their tendency and spirit. The ground occupied by the skeptic is the vestibule of the temple. Society does not like to have any breath of question blown on the existing order, but the interrogation of custom, at all points, is an inevitable stage in the growth of every superior mind, and is the evidence of its perception of the flowing power which remains itself in all changes. The superior mind will find itself equally at odds with the evils of society, and with the projects that are offered to relieve them. The wise skeptic is a bad citizen, no conservative. He sees the selfishness of property and the drowsiness of institutions. But neither is he fit to work with any democratic party that ever was constituted, for parties wish every one committed, and he penetrates the popular patriotism. His politics are those of the soul's errand of Sir Walter Raleigh, or of Krishna in the Bhagavat. There is none who is worthy of my love or hatred. While he sentences law, physic, divinity, commerce, and custom. He is a reformer, yet he is no better member of the philanthropic association. It turns out that he is not the champion of the operative, the pauper, the prisoner, the slave. It stands in his mind that our life in this world is not of quite so easy interpretation as churches and schoolbooks say. He does not wish to take ground against these benevolences, to play the part of devil's attorney, and blazon every doubt and sneer that darkens the sun for him. But he says, there are doubts. I mean to use the occasion, and celebrate the calendar day of our Saint Michel de Montaigne, by counting and describing these doubts or negations. I wish to ferret them out of their holes, and sun them a little. We must do with them as the police do with old rogues, who are shown up to the public at the marshal's office. They will never be so formidable, when once they have been identified and registered. But I mean honestly by them, that justice shall be done to their terrors. I shall not take Sunday objections, made up on purpose to be put down. I shall take the worst I can find, whether I can dispose of them, or they of me. I do not press the skepticism of the materialist. I know the quadruped opinion will not prevail. 'Tis of no importance what bats and oxen think. The first dangerous symptom I report is, the levity of intellect, as if it were fatal to earnestness to know much. Knowledge is the knowing that we cannot know. The dull pray, the geniuses are light mockers. How respectable is earnestness on every platform! but intellect kills it. Nay, San Carlo, my subtle and admirable friend, one of the most penetrating of men, finds that all direct ascension, even of lofty piety, leads to this ghastly insight, and sends back the votary orphaned. My astonishing San Carlo thought the lawgivers and saints infected. They found the ark empty, saw and would not tell, and tried to choke off their approaching followers by saying, "Action, action, my dear fellows, is for you." Bad as was to me this detection by San Carlo, this frost in July, this blow from a brick, there was still a worse, namely, the cloy of satiety of the saints. In the Mount of Vision, ere they have yet risen from their knees, they say, we discover that this our homage and beatitude is partial and deformed. We must fly for relief to the suspected and reviled intellect, to the understanding, the Mephistopheles, to the gymnastics of latent. This is Hobgoblin the first, and though it has been the subject of much elegy in our 19th century, from Byron, Goethe, and other poets of less fame, not to mention many distinguished private observers, I confess it is not very affecting to my imagination, for it seems to concern the shattering of baby houses and crockery shops. What flutters the Church of Rome, or of England, or of Geneva, or of Boston, may yet be very far from touching any principle of faith. I think that the intellect and moral sentiment are unanimous, and that, though philosophy extirpates bugbears, yet it supplies the natural checks of vice and polarity to the soul. I think that the wiser man is, the more stupendous he finds the natural and moral economy, and lifts himself to a more absolute reliance. There is the power of moods, each setting at naught all but its own tissue of facts and beliefs. There is the power of complexions, obviously modifying the dispositions and sentiments. The beliefs and unbeliefs appear to be structural, and, as soon as each man attains the poise and vivacity which allow the whole machinery to play, he will not need extreme examples, but will rapidly alternate all opinions in his own life. Our life is March weather, savage and serene in 1 hour. We go forth austere, dedicated, believing in the iron links of destiny, and will not turn on our heel to save our life. But a book, or a bust, or only the sound of a name, shoots a spark through the nerves, and we suddenly believe and will. My finger ring shall be the seal of Solomon. Fate is for imbeciles. All is possible to the resolved mind. Presently a new experience gives a new turn to our thoughts. Common sense resumes its tyranny. We say, well, the army, after all, is the gate to fame, manners, and poetry. And look you, on the whole, selfishness plants best, prunes best, makes the best commerce, and the best citizen. Are the opinions of a man on right and wrong, on fate and causation, at the mercy of a broken sleep or an indigestion? Is his belief in God and duty no deeper than a stomach evidence? And what guarantee for the permanence of his opinions? I like not the French celerity, a new church and state once a week. This is the second negation, and I shall let it pass for what it will. As far as it asserts rotation of states of mind, I suppose it suggests its own remedy, namely, in the record of larger periods. What is the mean of many states, of all the states? Does the general voice of ages affirm any principle, or is no community of sentiment discoverable in distant times and places? And when it shows the power of self-interest, I accept that as a part of the divine law, and must reconcile it with aspiration the best I can. The word fate or destiny expresses the sense of mankind in all ages, that the laws of the world do not always befriend, but often hurt and crush us. Fate, in the shape of kind or nature, grows over us like grass. We paint time with a scythe, love and fortune blind, and destiny deaf. We have too little power of resistance against this ferocity which champs us. What front can we make against these unavoidable, victorious, maleficent forces? What can I do against the influence of race in my history? What can I do against hereditary and constitutional habits, against scrofula, lymph, impotence? Against climate, against barbarism in my country? I can reason down or deny everything, except this perpetual belly. Feed he must and will, and I cannot make him respectable. But the main resistance which the affirmative impulse finds, and one including all others, is in the doctrine of the illusionists. There is a painful rumor in circulation, that we have been practiced upon in all the principal performances of life, and free agency is the emptiest name. We have been sopped and drugged with the air, with food, with women, with children, with sciences, with events which leave us exactly where they found us. The mathematics, 'tis complained, leave the mind where they find it. So do all sciences, and so do all events and actions. I find a man who has passed through all the sciences, the churl he was, and through all the offices, learned, civil, and social, can detect the child. We are not the less necessitated to dedicate life to them. In fact, we may come to accept it as the fixed rule and theory of our state of education, that God is a substance, and his method is illusion. The Eastern sages owned the goddess Yoganidra, the great illusory energy of Vishnu, by whom, as utter ignorance, the whole world is beguiled. Or shall I state it thus? The astonishment of life is the absence of any appearance of reconciliation between the theory and practice of life. Reason, the prized reality, the law, is apprehended, now and then, for a serene and profound moment, amidst the hubbub of cares and works which have no direct bearing on it, is then lost for months or years, and again found for an interval, to be lost again. If we compute it in time, we may in 50 years have half a dozen reasonable hours. But what are these cares and works the better? A method in the world we do not see, but this parallelism of great and little, which never react on each other, nor discover the smallest tendency to converge. Experiences, fortunes, governings, readings, writings, are nothing to the purpose, as when a man comes into the room, it does not appear whether he has been fed on yams or buffalo. He has contrived to get so much bone and fiber as he wants, out of rice or out of snow. So vast is the disproportion between the sky of law and the pismire of performance under it, that, whether he is a man of worth or of sot, is not so great a matter as we say. Shall I add, as one juggle of this enchantment, the stunning non-intercourse law, which makes cooperation impossible? The young spirit pants to enter society, but all the ways of culture and greatness lead to solitary imprisonment. He has been often balked. He did not expect a sympathy with his thought from the village, but he went with it to the chosen and intelligent, and found no entertainment for it, but mere misapprehension, distaste, and scoffing. Men are strangely mistimed and misapplied, and the excellence of each is an inflamed individualism which separates him more. There are these, and more than these diseases of thought, which our ordinary teachers do not attempt to remove. Now shall we, because a good nature inclines us to virtue's side, say, there are no doubts, and lie for the right? Is life to be led in a brave or in a cowardly manner? And is not the satisfaction of the doubts essential to all manliness? Is the name of virtue to be a barrier to that which is virtue? Can you not believe that a man of earnest and burly habit may find small good in tea, essays, and catechism, and want a rougher instruction, want men, labor, trade, farming, war, hunger, plenty, love, hatred, doubt, and terror, to make things plain to him? And has he not a right to insist on being convinced in his own way? When he is convinced, he will be worth the pains. Belief consists in accepting the affirmations of the soul, unbelief in denying them. Some minds are incapable of skepticism. The doubts they profess to entertain are rather a civility or accommodation to the common discourse of their company. They may well give themselves leave to speculate, for they are secure of a return. Once admitted to the heaven of thought, they see no relapse into night, but infinite invitation on the other side. Heaven is within heaven, and sky over sky, and they are encompassed with divinities. Others there are to whom the heaven is brass, and it shuts down to the surface of the earth. It is a question of temperament, or of more or less immersion in nature. The last class must needs have a reflex or parasite faith, not a sight of realities, but an instinctive reliance on the seers and believers of realities. The manners and thoughts of believers astonish them, and convince them that these have been something which is hid from themselves. But their sensual habit would fix the believer to his last position, whilst he as inevitably advances, and presently the unbeliever, for love of belief, burns the believer. Great believers are always reckoned infidels, impracticable, fantastic, atheistic, and really men of no account. The spiritualist finds himself driven to express his faith by a series of skepticisms. Charitable souls come with their projects, and ask his cooperation. How can he hesitate? It is the rule of mere comity and courtesy to agree where you can, and to turn your sentence with something auspicious, and not freezing and sinister. But he is forced to say, "Oh, these things will be as they must be. What can you do? These particular griefs and crimes are the foliage and fruit of such trees as we see growing. It is vain to complain of the leaf or the berry. Cut it off; it will bear another just as bad. You must begin your cure lower down." The generosities of the day prove an intractable element for him. The people's questions are not his, their methods are not his, and, against all the dictates of good nature, he is driven to say, he has no pleasure in them. Even the doctrines dear to the hope of man, of the divine providence, and of the immortality of the soul, his neighbors cannot put the statement so that he shall affirm it. But he denies out of more faith, and not less. He denies out of honesty. He'd rather stand charged with the imbecility of skepticism than with untruth. I believe, he says, in the moral design of the universe, it exists hospitably for the weal of the souls. But your dogmas seem to me caricatures. Why should I make believe them? Will any say, "This is cold and infidel"? The wise and magnanimous will not say so. They will exult in his far-sighted good-will, that can abandon to the adversary all the ground of tradition and common belief, without losing a jot of strength. It sees to the end of all transgression. George Fox saw that there was an ocean of darkness and death, but withal an infinite ocean of light and love which flowed over that of darkness. The final solution in which skepticism is lost is in the moral sentiment, which never forfeits its supremacy. All moods may be safely tried, and their weight allowed to all objections. The moral sentiment as easily outweighs them all as any one. This is the drop which balances the sea. I play with the miscellany of facts, and take those superficial views which we call skepticism. But I know that they will presently appear to me in that order which makes skepticism impossible. A man of thought must feel the thought that is parent of the universe, that the masses of nature do undulate and flow. This faith avails to the whole emergency of life and objects. The world is saturated with deity and with law. He is content with just and unjust, with sots and fools, with the triumph of folly and fraud. He can behold with serenity the yawning gulf between the ambition of man and his power of performance, between the demand and supply of power which makes the tragedy of all souls. Charles Fourier announced that the attractions of man are proportioned to his destinies. In other words, that every desire predicts its own satisfaction. Yet all experience exhibits the reverse of this. The incompetency of power is the universal grief of young and ardent minds. They accuse the divine providence of a certain parsimony. It has shown the heaven and earth to every child, and filled him with a desire for the whole, a desire raging, infinite, a hunger as of space to be filled with planets, a cry of famine, as of devils for souls. Then for the satisfaction, to each man, is administered a single drop, a bead of dew of vital power per day, a cup as large as space, and one drop of the water of life in it. Each man woke in the morning with an appetite that could eat the solar system like a cake, a spirit for action and passion without bounds. He could lay his hand on the morning star. He could try conclusions with gravitation or chemistry. But, on the first motion to prove his strength, hands, feet, senses, gave way, and would not serve him. He was an emperor deserted by his states, and left to whistle by himself, or thrust into a mob of emperors, all whistling. And still the sirens sang, "The attractions are proportioned to the destinies." In every house, in the heart of each maiden and of each boy, in the soul of the soaring saint, this chasm is found, between the largest promise of ideal power and the shabby experience. The expansive nature of truth comes to our succor, elastic, not to be surrounded. Man helps himself by larger generalizations. The lesson of life is practically to generalize, to believe what the years and the centuries say against the hours, to resist the usurpation of particulars, to penetrate to their Catholic sense. Things seem to say one thing, and say the reverse. The appearance is immoral, the result is moral. Things seem to tend downward, to justify despondency, to promote rogues, to defeat the just. And by knaves, as by martyrs, the just cause is carried forward. Although knaves win in every political struggle, although society seems to be delivered over from the hands of one set of criminals into the hands of another set of criminals, as fast as the government is changed, and the march of civilization is a train of felonies, yet general ends are somehow answered. We see now events forced on, which seem to retard or retrograde the civility of ages. But the world spirit is a good swimmer, and storms and waves cannot drown him. He snaps his finger at laws, and so, throughout history, heaven seems to affect low and poor means. Through the years and the centuries, through evil agents, through toys and atoms, a great and beneficent tendency irresistibly streams. Let a man learn to look for the permanent in the mutable and fleeting. Let him learn to bear the disappearance of things he was wont to reverence, without losing his reverence. Let him learn that he is here, not to work, but to be worked upon, and that though abyss open under abyss, and opinion displace opinion, all are at last contained in the eternal cause. If my bark sink, 'tis to another sea. End chapter 4. Montaigne, or the Skeptic.